All right, everybody, welcome to Tesla Today. Some big news dropped just this morning. Tesla's 10Q came out, and there's some very interesting information regarding that. The media is now reacting to Tesla's growth story. We'd like to look at what they've been saying this morning. And of course, there's some actually big moves by Tesla in India. At the same time, BYD is struggling in India. So today we have Jeff Lutz with us. Jeff is a supply chain executive at Fortune 100 companies. He's currently running his own consulting firm. Welcome, Jeff. Thank you for joining me.
Good to be with you. Let's get into it.
All right, let's get into it. Here we go. So the first thing let's talk about is, of course, after the earnings call that happened on Wednesday last week, we saw the stock falling. So here's the 19th, and now we're seeing it fall on the 20th, 21st, and 24th. This is the 1 week view. And just to see how it all compares, here's what it was happening the 3 weeks prior to that. We know that that's partly because of the NASDAQ rebalancing. But Jeff, what's your thinking about why this is happening?
I mean, from the earnings call, I think you always get some of these hyperbolic reactions. There's a lot of options play happening. Of course, you mentioned the NASDAQ rebalancing. Technically, you know, Tesla's in a good spot. I think right now, I mean, it's up, it's doing well this morning. And it's still kind of in this window in terms of it's on an uptrend. And when you're on an uptrend, you're going to have these points where it has to consolidate and you know, have a little bit of a breather. And again, I think there was a bit of an overreaction that, you know, to Tesla's comments on the call regarding, you know, how they see gross margins playing out in the future. But when we get into the 10Q, you'll see, you know, that there's really great things happening under the hood to solidify gross margins in the near term. And we'll talk about, you know, why Tesla has an advantage. But I think it's just kind of, there's some technical reaction, there's some NASDAQ 100 reaction, and then there's some reaction to mixed reactions to the earnings call. But I think there were things on that call to be also extremely excited about at the same time, both for the near term and the medium to long term. Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Jeff. So one of the things that you pointed out this morning, you tweeted out this morning, is the reaction by the media. We've got Jim Cramer interviewing the CEO of, what is it? Chevron, which is Mike Wirth. And then you pointed out this message is sponsored by Chevron and the oil and gas industry. And you've got this tweet that you pointed out that the number one in advertiser on CNBC and NBC with $120 million are the oil and gas companies, of which Chevron is second in line. So we can watch what they said, and then you can react to it.
You see, we may be at the early end of what is EV regret. That there are a lot of people who have bought EVs and they're realizing that they're having anxiety upon changing about charging stations. Looks like it may be slowing in this country. I know that's antithetical to what most people think, but boy, when you deal with the companies one by one, you really get the sense that they're too expensive and that people are turning against them. Is it possible that you have to revise down the challenge from EVs for your company in this country?
Well, we watched that, Jim. The pattern is not dissimilar to when we first saw the Prius and hybrids come in, where there's a surge of purchases, and then you have a kind of a period of time where most people who want that type of vehicle have one, and you're trying to sell to a different part of the market. I think these kinds of
yeah, I just cut it there.
It just cut. Sorry about that. What do you say?
I mean, a number of things. First off, it was just filled with inaccuracies. And again, the reason I wrote that tweet in terms of it's sponsored by Chevron is every other week of the year. So every 2 weeks, Chevron writes a check to CNBC for $1 million. That's what people need to understand. Every other week, they write a check for $1 million and send it to CNBC. So let's go through the inaccuracies one by one. The EV industry is, you know, they're talking about the United States, Chevron, mostly. And the EV industry is stalling or not growing. That's not a fact. There's 7% of vehicle purchases this year are EVs. It was about 4.6 to 5% of all auto purchases last year. So it's about 40% growth that's occurring, maybe even higher, 40 to 50% growth on EVs. The second thing is people are worried about charging. Tesla obviously has implemented an answer to that, opening up over 12,000 charger stations starting, next year for multiple vendors. Everyone that basically comes to them, Tesla's opening that up. What's the next thing? They're too expensive. Well, non-Tesla EVs are too expensive. The average transaction price of a Tesla is lower now. It crossed over in Q1 of this year, is now lower than the average transaction price of an ICE vehicle bought in the United States. And the final thing is, he said people are having regret, EV regret. The Net Promoter Score is a quality tool that's used across multiple industries. It's used in auto. It's used in the mobile phone industry. I administered it as chief quality officer, at a couple of different Fortune 100 companies. And Tesla's Net Promoter Score is in the mid 90s. It's far and away not only the best EV, but the best auto Net Promoter Score. That means when people buy Teslas, not only are they satisfied with them, that they're actually recommending others to go buy and purchase a Tesla. So literally on every point that was said during that interview, and I believe that they had come up with a set of speaking points between them prior to this interview, aligned on them, and then had the interview. It really just, I get upset about it. I tweet about it, and I try to just tie the two together of why are they doing this and follow the money.
Yeah, but what he was saying was that this is following the same pattern as the Prius and the hybrids. It's all positioning. Of course, we know that data is completely the opposite of that, but he needs to maintain his stock going up, right? It was nice that they showed the stock. I know they do this quite regularly, but here's the stock, and that's why he's saying what he's saying, right?
Right.
All right. So this morning, the Tesla 10Q came out, and the paragraph that was quite interesting was this one. It says, our cost reduction efforts, cost innovation strategies, and localized procurement manufacturing are key to our vehicles' affordability, allowed us to competitively price our vehicles, will continue to generate demand and brand awareness, improving our vehicles' performance and functionality. And then, of course, they're going to include in the autopilot and FSD and other software features, such as our coming track. But it says, moreover, we expect to continue to benefit from ongoing electrification, right? And all that. And then the second paragraph here talks about all the risks that they have. And then I think the interesting part was they said, and even despite all of that, they're able to focus on operating leverage that will continue to benefit us in relation to our competitors. So then you tweeted this out, their favorable gap in operational efficiencies relative to the competition is only growing. Competitors are still trying to design vehicles with a hardware margin of the 2017 Model 3, and they still haven't achieved parity. So this is not only the fact that they're so far behind, but with the conditions that are happening right now, they're not going to be able to catch up, and only Tesla is able to create fantastic margins in this environment.
Yeah, and if I had more characters, I guess we can write longer tweets. I would say that if you look ahead and you look at what we saw on Investor Day in terms of how that vehicle's designed, the unboxed manufacturing assembly process in the factory, that gap is further growing. And the point I wanted to make was, they're in the 10Q, they and in their earnings call, Tesla has to, responsibly, they have to go through the risks that are out there, and they can't just be all bulled up on the call. They've got to present the risks in an effective manner. But if you read that 10Q, what they're spelling out in the 10Q is that they have operational efficiencies that are only growing, right? As remember, these factories are filling up, every single quarter, and they'll continue to fill up every single quarter. And then they're releasing new vehicle models that are purposefully designed at lower unit economics to meet at lower price points. Excuse me. So with those factors in mind, they're balancing the risk, but they're also showing you why, they believe that they're going to be in good shape. One of my key takeaways from that is I think the analysts kind of had this binary response from the call, which was Tesla's answer to gross margins is, they can go lower. We have FSD coming in the future. But when you read the 10Q, they really talk more about their operational efficiencies and how they think that will continue to progress over time. And I just tied the two together because you can see all the different model introductions from the competition, but that's just what they are. They're model introductions. They can't put them at scale because of their negative operating and gross margins, and they haven't caught up to the Model 3 and Model Ys that are based off of a 2017 Tesla design. So this gap is fairly wide, and I think it's going to continue growing in the near term. Will there be better EVs from competitors in 1 to 2 years? Yeah, we're already seeing better EVs from the likes of Hyundai and so forth, but at the same time, they're still gapped to where Tesla is and will be in terms of value per dollar or price per performance.
Hey there, thank you for joining me. If you can, please consider supporting this channel so I can keep it going. It's a lot of work arranging all these amazing interviews. One of the easiest ways is just to click that join button and become a member of the channel. Thank you very much, and let's get brighter. In the past, you've been saying that Tesla is about 5 to 7 years, a generation ahead. Are you thinking now that because of the macro environment that we went through, that maybe they're even gapping further?
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to put, an exact number on that, but I maintain that they're a full, generation ahead and leaning in the direction of further growth or further gap. And then when things like FSD and real world AI hit, and they hit at more at scale. By the way, 1 out of every 4 capable cars in the US are buying FSD. That's a big number. That's a big take rate. But when that really gets to, full real world AI, I mean, then the gap becomes, maybe measured in decades.
Okay, so I made a mistake, actually. I positioned that as a section on energy. That was section on cost reduction and operational efficiency. So the 10th Q, that was that section. This section on energy, actually, this part right here was brought out. And so the key parts of this is that the gross margin for energy generation improved from 11.2% to 18.4% in the 3 months in a quarter as compared to the last year's quarter. And then as compared to the 6 months, it's actually 1.7% to 14.7% gross margin. It's a huge drive. The increases were driven by the changes in megapack revenue and cost per megawatt per hour as described above. Yeah, you had some comments on this, Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, the way to think of this is, so energy deployments are up over 200%. Elon has said this is an area for us that's going to grow in the 200 to 300% range, so faster than auto, and it is. 1, 2, that gross margin improvement, that's sequential gross margin improvement from the prior quarter. So it went from I think 11 to 17 or 18%, 70% improvement. And
it's something I think
sorry, there's some audio playing in the background. The way to think about that improvement is they're getting that amount of gross margin improvement while only 1/3 of the Lathrop factory it's running only at 1/3 of the 40. It's only running at 1/3 of the capacity, their final end capacity, and that is significant. That tells me that, I mean, it's not linear, but it tells me that the ceiling on gross margin for Megapacks specifically may be a lot higher than what was promised by Tesla. Let's see. It takes a while to play out, but that kind of sequential jump with the factory still only running at 1/3 capacity is pretty meaningful to me.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So there's one section of that earnings call last week that we covered in depth already, which is the statement by Elon that there's going to be a partnership with a major OEM for licensing FSD. So I wanted to ask you, though, because there's some things that you are very familiar with, how does a company like a Tesla partner with other companies? How does that work? What are the nuances around that? So let me play a little bit about what we heard him say, and then we'll go from there.
I want to emphasize, very, very strongly, this is a very important point, is that Tesla, just as with the the North American charging standard, although we're not licensing. In that case, we're not licensing, we're just making it available. but we are very open to licensing our full self-driving software and hardware to other car companies. And we are already in discussions with, early discussions with a major OEM about using the Tesla FSD. So we're not trying to keep this to ourselves. We're more than happy to license it to others.
All right, Jeff, what do you want to say about that part?
Yeah. Obviously super exciting. The way to think about this, they could come, the relationship between Tesla and other OEMs, the way that deal could go down could take multiple forms. One thing that kind of generally happens is they get together, they work on a contract together. The nice thing is that Tesla now has established some sort of master services agreement. It doesn't mean that they signed a license with supercharging, but there's some agreement in terms of how money and transactions move, and and other contract terms between the two companies. It's just not open. So now off the back of that they can now work on a licensing deal for FSD. Number one, I think companies are going to be advantaged to work with Tesla earlier before they get, before they remove the beta label. They're going to be a much better advantage working with Tesla earlier than later. One, they can start outfitting their cars. They can start doing testing with Tesla very early, and they can almost get themselves on a release cadence. Kind of like if you think about the Android world, Google releases a new major release every year. And then there's vendors that actually are capable of integrating that within a couple of weeks, if not a month, so that it's released on their devices. But those vendors are working, much earlier up, in the time frame, to enable that. It's not like everything's happening in serial. So I think potential partners with Tesla would be behooved to work early with Tesla. And I think that announcement on the earnings call was also kind of an open announcement to say, if others are interested, we only have so much capacity to work with partners, and to kind of just get that message out. So what happens in this time frame is you're prior to production and prior to releasing the product together, there's work that's called NRE, or non-recurring engineering work, which is you do it, and it's, for example, it's giving them the tools, it's giving them, it's maybe giving them engineering time and hours to help integrate it into their vehicles. Those things may be non-recurring because once they're done, they're done. And then there's so that's on the left side of the ledger. On the right side of the ledger is where really all the money is made in terms of, the usage of infrastructure and a license for that, potentially the sale of hardware, right? The full self-driving computer, which again, that's Tesla silicon, and selling them to that for either, at some profit. And but it's really the licensing of the infrastructure, the hardware, and then of course access to the data and the training, all of that, and then access to Tesla resources. I mean, the number of different nodes that Tesla could be getting paid for full self-driving, I mean, there's a lot. I just described 3 or 4 of them. And the big thing is, as they do this, they're going to be making all these vehicles and these drivers in these vehicles that much more safer. So I think it's really kind of aligning well with the mission. But I think in summary, I think it's going to behoove partners to work with Tesla earlier versus later. And you don't have to wait until 2026. We think the first vehicle may roll out with a Tesla licensed FSD. That's, some people estimate that. There could be, payments inbound much, much earlier from these partners just for that engineering time and just to start procuring the infrastructure capacity and the hardware for vehicles.
Yeah. So now thinking about the partnership that they did with the superchargers, it sounds very, very simplistic when you first think about it, right? These OEMs are now going to be able to charge their cars at any of the Tesla superchargers. But in order to do that, these OEMs has to install a charger hardware into their cars. They have to have the software from from Tesla. And so Tesla is going to be able to keep track of so many things that's happening in that car, the non-Tesla car, as it goes on. Now, with this partnership with FSD, though, right? Have you kind of broke it down to what does that actually mean, right? So this means that a major OEM is now going to have to install 8 cameras. They would have to have the FSD computer chip into their system. They would have to have the software, and then whether or not it's hardware 3, hardware 4, whether or not and then they would have to the computer inside the automaker's car could track everything at this point, everything. Obviously it's going to be tracking when the gas pedal is pressed, just where the car is going. It's basically is the brains of the computer. So how does that work? Like, how would a major OEM implement that? Is it that much easier? I guess, they don't have to create the supercomputer. They don't have to build the capability, but there's still work for them to integrate this. How would that work, do you think?
Yeah, they're going to buy that whole board from Tesla that has the Tesla AI chips on it and all the surrounding circuitry. And then they're going to integrate that board inside of their car as part of, that when their main computer in their car calls the ADAS system, that's going to be the Tesla computer, inside of the vehicle, and then all the associated controls. So yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting for Tesla. I mean, this could be a whole dissertation for them, how to lay out the partner program and how would partnering with Tesla work. I can imagine this would be a website that they would start putting up in terms of, a licensing website that they would put up when there's interested partners, because there's a lot of auto manufacturers, and Tesla's going to have to also allocate, their time effectively in terms of which partner should I work with based on their volume and based on their ability to get the market. And so, yeah, there's a number of things to think about. It's going to play out over a number of years. But what I'm saying is it could start right now. If there's a partner announced and then there's engineering work that Tesla has to do with that partner, Tesla could be receiving funding from those partners immediately, because it's, those partners are funding some other solution, right now. So, so anyway, yeah, it's, I think they're going to have to set up a whole partner apparatus. They're going to have to set up a whole kind of not organization, but there'll have to be a group of people that manage these partnerships, and manage the inflow of information, back and forth, and requirements. But the nice thing about Tesla versus an NVIDIA is Tesla will have the end-to-end solution. Tesla, again, designed the silicon from the ground up. They went to an external fab house to fab it, and then they integrated it back into their vehicles, run all the test cases, all the simulations. And so when they're working with a partner like a Ford or whatever, those partners are like, okay, this is an actual auto manufacturer. They know, the ins and outs of everything, versus an NVIDIA side, they design silicon for this, and they design simulations and so forth, but they don't construct the end vehicle. So if I'm a partner, obviously I want to look at the terms of the deal, and I would want leverage in the industry, but I would want competition in the industry. But I think, partnering with Tesla, I mean, it's going to depend on the performance of the solution. But if you see, they've already got a 10x lead in miles, and that gap is just further growing, and data is going to be king in this.
Yeah, that's a very, very good point. That because Tesla is an automaker, they know how to integrate this. It's going to be a much better, easier partnership than if they did like a Mobileye or an NVIDIA. So what do you think is going to happen? Like, if you thought through, how would the first partners with Tesla, how would the other OEMs react to that? When I think about the supercharger, it made a lot of sense why when one falls, the others have to all fall, because their communication to their customers can't be that, these car manufacturers have access to all these superchargers, but we don't, right? In this case of FSD, is it the same thing, right? So obviously those cars can do super car stuff. It can drive itself, ours can't. Or do you think that there is a way that, just because one falls, you don't necessarily have to have the others falling in line? So in your experience, when you've done your big partnerships, is there some criteria that you would be able to say that, once we do one, the others fall?
Yeah, I mean, without naming names, I can tell you just a personal experience, and then we can kind of broaden it out. In around 2017, there was a lot of various hardware startups and fairly big operations. In fact, one that was acquired by a very big company. They asked me to come in to see if I wanted to help manage their supply chain for actually fabricating the onboard compute, all the controls, everything for self-driving vehicles, all the way up through trucking. And when I went to visit them, I noticed like everything, they had all their vehicles set up and running. And then I went to another portion of the garage with them, and there were about, I want to say, 6 to 8 Teslas. This is 2017. And I said, "Oh, what are you doing with all the Teslas?" They said, "Well, we're testing them out, and we're trying to understand and kind of reverse engineer what they're doing and what their solution is." So all these different auto manufacturers and all these different companies that are working on these solutions, whether it's Mobileye or some of the other companies in Europe, they all have the latest Teslas, the latest hardware, the latest software on them, and they're driving these vehicles and they're gathering data and they're trying to understand what they're doing. And as Tesla gets closer and closer, to a real world AI solution, they also see the same data that we see in terms of the miles driven, all the training data. They also see the same data that we see about the amount of compute that both Tesla is procuring from NVIDIA with their cluster, but also that they're designing their own silicon for fabrication. So they're not going to be part of this bottleneck anymore. They see all of that. And, as they get closer, the longer they wait to make a decision to partner with Tesla, if I'm Tesla, I mean, the cost of working together go up, because my bandwidth is going to go lower and I'm going to have to start allocating. So it's going to behoove these partners to get in and work early with the Tesla, and then Tesla will develop something called a development kit, and they'll have a whole partner team and a whole apparatus that says, all right, you want to put self-driving, in your car, here's our developer kit, here's our hardware computer, here's our cameras, here's the specifications of our cameras, here's the configurations, here's the settings, here's the calibration software, here's basically a development kit for putting this in your car. Here's the partnership team, both product management, program managers, engineers, and so forth, to work with. And all of that, if managed effectively, is not only charged out, but it's charged out at a massive premium. So that's why I'm saying the dollars on the partnership deals could start flowing well before into Tesla, well before you actually start seeing non-Tesla vehicles with Tesla FSD on the road.
Okay, very nice. Thank you. All right, let's move on. I'm glad I asked you that question, because your background helps you figure these things out better than many of us. So some of the really big, giant news, I think this is real. This is real. Tesla is continuing discussions of a factory in India, and some more information is that it's supposed to be a $24,000 car. And the reason I'm saying that is that it's still very much a person with direct knowledge. It's still somebody who doesn't know anything. But there was continued write-ups in the news, in Tesla's India news articles. So it says here, Tesla representatives are set to meet India's commerce minister this month to discuss a plan to build a factory to produce what the company has described as an all-new $24,000 car. And of course, we know that they've been talking to them, especially even with Modi a while back. But the first time we saw a $24,000, 2 million rupee Tesla EV was what they're talking about. Was reported by the Times of India newspaper.
Yeah, the TAM in India is really destined, for this lower tier. I mean, will Model S's and X's sell there? Sure, at some percentage. Model Ys, sure, but it's really destined for this lower cost, newly designed, unboxed manufacturing process vehicle, which is probably going to be every bit as good as a Model 3 or Y, but in 2 years from now, but it's going to have a much lower cost structure and price point, and maybe physically smaller as well, obviously. But this is, working with India, the Indian people are great. They're competitive. The government's competitive. But if you step out kind of from a 10,000 foot level, there's two games in the world right now in town. There's only 2 games in town, or 1 game in town. There's only 2 players in town in the world, really, that are big on EV. It's China and it's the US. And in the US, it's Tesla. And in China, it's BYD, Li Auto. It's 3 to 5 major manufacturers, but they make most, between Tesla and those names in China, they make most of the EVs in the world. So India has to make a decision. They've got the US and Tesla, where they've got kind of a favorable relationship, competitive but favorable relationship, right, with the US. And then you've got China, and you've got these companies, auto companies in China, which are not private companies; they're state sponsored. And so in terms of what this means for Tesla, the $24,000 car, who knows what the Tesla doesn't know probably today what the exact MSRP is going to be of that vehicle. They know they're targeting a vehicle, at the time of Investor Day that was, half the cost to build of prior vehicles. So that's a good estimate of where to put an MSRP. But, this is good news. I think this is continuing to progress and move forward. I think it's all in favorable terms. I think the Modi-Elon meeting was to probably push a few key things, back and forth between each other. But I think they're on track, either for announcement either later this year or early next year. And they'll really accelerate getting this built, because India is looking over their shoulder and they see China has this gigantic lead on them in terms of manufacturing clean EVs. And not only are they manufacturing them for China, but they're exporting. They have a big export business. So this is what India ultimately wants to do. They want to get EVs into India. They want to get it going, but they really want to export them.
Nice. Exactly. There you go. I love it. They're looking at China. And I do think it might actually happen by the end of this year, like you said. Very interesting, because to continue this, apparently these 2 people who are, sharing that information, they said that the discussions with the Indian government are scheduled to resume this month. This is Tesla and the Indian government. And they're set to meet with the Indian Commerce Minister, Goyal. And discussions are expected to center around setting up an EV supply chain and discussing land allotment for a factory. So it's like continued information that's being dripped to us, and it's looking like it's a really big go. So this is all in context when, at the very same time, India rejected BYD's proposal. So a couple of weeks ago, we reported that BYD submitted a proposal. They have a partnership with a company called Mega, which is an Indian company. And BYD and Mega together submitted a plan for $1 billion 4-wheel facility. They were going to 10,000 to 15,000 electric cars per year. That's what just a picture of the BYD. And apparently today, Center rejected their proposal. The Economic Times, the India Economic Times reported on Saturday. And and then it also included the plan for BYD and Mega to set up charging stations. But because the center tightened FDI rules, making government approval mandatory for investments coming, because in the past, they were very open to investments, but now they tightened it up. So now they got approval from them. And this is what they had said. The security concerns with respect to Chinese investments in India were flagged during the deliberations. And existing rules in India do not allow such investments anymore. And I think the article also talked about, which is that there was actually skirmishes between India and China, military skirmishes in a border that they had. And so is that what this is? They would let Tesla in, but not BYD. What was your take on all this?
100%. In fact, when we talked about this a week or two ago, Herbert, I labeled BYD's plan is not a plan to win, but a plan to participate, when they went in with a joint venture with Mega. And you can see by the, how this is being, set up. They had to do that. They could not have submitted a wholly owned facility, a wholly owned BYD facility to manufacture in India. BYD is state sponsored by the Chinese government. So they couldn't have gone in by themselves and gone head to head with Tesla. So they had to do a joint venture. And even the joint venture is getting shot down again due to national security concerns. And they have an active, border dispute. They have active border disputes between the two countries happening. But this is really economic as well from a national security perspective. Again, India does not want that gap between them and China to rise, and China's clearly taken the lead on EV from them, and they need to catch up. So again, this puts leverage back into the Tesla camp. This rejection of BYD just puts a load of leverage back into the Tesla camp. Not that they really needed it; they had the leverage already. But this just further adds to it. I don't see BYD allowing any large scale manufacturing from a Chinese state-sponsored company, at least for autos, to occur. They may allow other industries that are more saturated, but I don't see them allowing this to occur. They want to build up their own industry, and they want to learn from the best, which is Tesla.
Yeah, that's interesting. I do think that, like you said, makes sense. India wants to compete in creating cars, so they'll let Tesla in for them to create it, but they won't let India in or China in. Although I did see here that BYD already has a presence in India where they're selling this Atto 3 and the E6 to corporate fleets. So they've got the right to sell to corporate fleets, not to the mass market. And they had plans. I think this is probably not going to happen anymore. BYD had plans to mass market in 2023. That's not going to happen anymore. And then this was the part about talking about they're restricting the Chinese investment because of deadly clashes. So there's a border dispute, like you said. Great Wall Motor Company failed in an attempt to buy a General Motors plant after it couldn't get approval to close the deal. So they're playing along. The political situation is possibly affecting what's happening, very likely affecting what's happening.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So here we are, I find it funny because we're obviously a Tesla channel. We are Tesla investors, but a lot of the news we report is all very positive things happening for Tesla, negative things happening for the competitors. And I'm just like, if there was some good news coming from competitors, we would definitely report that as well. But right now, it just seems like it's a completely one-sided. Lots of very, very good news for Tesla. What's your expectation for Q3, Jeff?
Yeah, so for Q3, Tesla said, and Alexander did a great job of kind of giving those excerpts from the call in one of her tweets. But Tesla said production will be slightly lower than Q2 as they work through these. They're bringing down lines in my opinion to re-outfit them for new vehicles. I believe the Model 3 Highland, potentially upgrades or updates to the Model Y as well. And to me, they're kind of slowing down to go faster. And I think the data will show that, especially in Q4. But I want to let people know that this is very normal. When companies do capacity planning for the year, when they say they're going to install a manufacturing line, they don't install it. They don't put a production calendar up and say, we're going to run this thing for 52 weeks in a year. The standard range is somewhere in the 46 to 49 week range in terms of total utilization in the denominator. That's what's used, is about 46 to 49 weeks of uptime. And so if you see 3 to 6 weeks scattered throughout the year, whether it's downtime for maintenance, whether it's downtime for a couple days for a holiday, like in the US around Christmas, or around in China and in the May Labor Day, or September holidays and October holidays, that's normal. That's normal. Now, they will run overtime in some situations in certain bottleneck processes during those holidays, but it's normal though to take lines down for maintenance, to recalibrate, to improve them, or to re-outfit them for basically new lines, for new product lines. This is totally normal. It happens. And if you don't do that, especially in the maintenance case, you could have downtime that's many, many weeks longer than that 46 to 49 week total utilization window I talked about. And that's what you want to avoid when you're running a manufacturing plant. So, you know, when I see this downtime, to me, it's totally normal. And I believe that they're getting ready for new models. And you see them, what they're doing on the inventory side in terms of inventory discounts to bleed out old inventory. And then finally, while production may be slightly lower, you know, they still could deliver. They still could increase deliveries, and the reason over the prior quarter, and the reason is inventory. So Tesla has a lot of different levers. They have industry-leading inventory that they could move if they need to. So in terms of deliveries, I haven't come up with my number yet. I will, but I think it's going to be, you know, it's going to be higher than the 466, and then, you know, production, we'll have to see where that comes in. But, you know, obviously with those weeks of downtime will be a bit lower.
Okay, good. All right, thank you. So we saw the Chevron CEO. We saw the OEMs wanting, or at least one major OEMs in discussions for licensing FSD. We saw movement by Tesla for Gigafactory India, but meanwhile, BYD was rejected. So it's interesting to see what's going to happen in the next several months. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate you. Thank you so much, Jeff.
Thank you.